That all happened more than 30 years ago. Back then, I often wrote exclusive interviews with business leaders. Although I was still a young man, not yet 30, I looked older than my age, much older. Maybe it was because of that mature look that bosses of both small- to medium enterprises felt comfortable opening up to me, sharing their stories honestly. I remember it happened in the spring. One day, an editor I knew called me out of the blue. He said he had a friend, an old chief editor, who was eager for us to put together a feature on a company that we had never worked with before. Since I didn't have anything lined up that day, he asked if I wanted to go check it out. I glanced at my schedule, saw the day was clear, and immediately said yes. So a photographer and I went to visit the company. Before the visit, I did a little background check. I learned this company was originally a family-run factory, but 2 years ago, they had swapped out the management team and switched their focus to electronic components. Their growth since then was explosive, almost unbelievably fast. Honestly, companies like this were a goldmine for us. Usually, all it took was to sing the praises of the CIO's achievements in glowing terms, and they'd be very pleased. The photographer with me that day was a senior colleague who had always looked out for me. He was also known for his strong intuition-prone, accidentally capturing ghostly apparitions in his photos. As we walked, I joked with him, let's hope nothing strange happens today. Then we stepped inside the company. In the lobby, an older woman greeted us. She worked in general affairs and had been with the company since the very beginning. When I saw her face, both the photographer and I felt uneasy. It was just plain coldness, it was pure hostility and disgust. We were then led into the CIO's office. From the moment I entered, the atmosphere felt deeply uncomfortable. Minutes later, the CEO appeared. He was a man in his early 40s, unusually thin. His expensive clothes showed he wasn't shy about spending money, but no matter how you looked at him, he didn't have the bearing of a manufacturing boss. He seemed like someone from the financial sector. As soon as he entered, he launched into self-meanness praise, just as I expected from my first impression. He used to be a fund manager, his specialty finding companies with solid potential but poor performance, taking over management rights, then flipping them quickly for profit. Listening to him speak, I couldn't deny his logic was sharp and his words precise, but there was always this strange, unsettling vibe around him. During the interview, the photographer took a few shots, but far fewer than usual. I noticed this and glanced at him. His expression was unusually serious. When the interview neared its end, we moved to take the CIO's portrait for the article. He sat at an enormous redwood desk, posing confidently for the camera. That's when I finally saw something wrong, even with the naked eye. Behind the CIO, there appeared to be something swinging subtly, like a rope or a cord, just brushing behind him. I looked at the photographer. His face was tense, almost alarmed. He whispered to me, "I just can't press the shutter." At that moment, both of us just wanted to get out of that room as fast as possible. Thinking quickly, I said, "The formal portrait in the office looks good, but wouldn't a shot of the CEO at the factory, supervising on the floor, showing his youthful energy, be more dynamic?" That worked as a pretext. We forced the shoot to move to the factory instead. There, I could finally press the shutter again, and the rest of the work went smoothly. But as we were about to leave, the general affairs lady who greeted us called us back. She took us to a small conference room and served us coffee. Then she asked quietly, "Did you feel anything strange during your interview in the CIO's office? Was that room odd?" Hearing her, we realized we couldn't hide what had just happened, so we told her about the shutter not pressing, the eerie feeling inside, and the ropey ice-like thing we'd seen behind the CEO. She sighed deathly, then said, "Actually, the former CIO was killed by that man. Back then, he forced unreasonable financing through the bank. pushing the company into a devastating downturn. She injected a huge amount of capital into the company and swiftly transformed herself into a top executive. In a short time, she used the board to push the former president out of control. Later, that former president ended up hanging himself in his office. Hearing this, I finally understood everything clearly. She continued, "I don't think this company will last much longer. I heard that guy plans to make a quick profit by reselling the management rights again. But this place is already soaked with resentment. The veteran employees are quitting one by one, no matter how loudly they promote those new business ventures. If there's no one passing down the technical skills, the company is finished." That was the end of our conversation with that woman. Afterwards, our report was already prepared and scheduled to be published in the magazine. Then one day, I suddenly got news that the company had collapsed. I heard the current president invested heavily in real estate, but miscalculated badly. The investment failed, all the funds were burned through, and massive non-menace performing loans piled up. In the end, he was the one who ruined the company. I'm a reporter for a local magazine. For the next special feature, I planned a horror project that would open up famous haunted spots around the area, ghost sites, suicide hotspots, and personally go there to photograph and report. That day, I arrived at an apartment building. I shook hands with a man in his 40s standing outside and handed over my business card. He said, "Hello, pleased to meet you. Is there anything you need me to do?" I replied, "No, not at all. Just allow me to enter and cover the story. Oh, by the way, no one lives here anymore, right?" I asked. He sighed helplessly. "Yeah, because of that terrifying rumor. All 6 units are empty now, after being a landlord for so many years. This is my first time facing something like this. In planning to sell next month, the deficit has become too serious. And don't worry about the interview fee. He'll transfer it to you this week." Hearing this, he visibly relaxed. The furrows on his brow eased. After a slight bow, he left. I watched him go, then looked up to illuminate the apartment with my flashlight. The building was 12 years old, quite ordinary in appearance. A typical one you'd see anywhere, not really shabby, even well maintained. Nothing obvious hinting at a problem. Yet, according to rumors, this was the city's #1 suicide hotspot. In fact, many people had jumped from here. Some died, but only a few. Most were badly injured, broken bones and all. In other words, more people survived than I'd. I observed quietly and nodded to myself. That actually made sense because only the 3rd floor isn't that high. Of course, if you land badly, you could die. But would someone who truly wants to die choose this place? It all seemed unbelievable, suspicious even. After mulling over this, I started taking photos of the apartment exterior. With that done, I began asking passers-by about the place. I learned a few things. Sometimes some unruly youths came here to test their luck. Police patrols were frequent. There were also signs nearby hoping to prevent suicides, all of which added credibility to the rumors. But the more I thought about it, the more questions I had. This wouldn't clear anything up by thinking alone. I decided not to go home tonight. I parked opposite the building and planned to keep watch to see if anything strange would happen, then continue the interview after dawn. While sitting in the car waiting, I noticed some people passing by, pointing at the apartment and whispering as they walked away. The rumors sure ran deep. Every 2 hours, a police car passed the building. After I finished dinner a convenience store bento, I smoked a cigarette and glanced at my watch. It was already 1 in the morning. I stubbed out the cigarette in an empty can while grumbling. Nothing weird has happened. Looks like tonight's a bust. Then suddenly, the hallway light on the building's 1st floor flicked on. Somebody must have pressed the switch. Squinting closer, I saw a shadow like a woman swaying past. I thought, who could that be at this hour? Could it be the landlord's wife? If so, at least I should greet her and maybe ask for clues. I hurried inside the building, but as soon as I reached the first floor and looked around, no one was there. Puzzled, I looked up and muttered, "Are they upstairs?" Then I started climbing the stairs. Heading upstairs, I reached the second floor and glanced around, no one there. Then I went up to the third floor, still empty. I tried the doors to the rooms nearby, but all were locked, so it seemed no one was on the third floor. I had no choice but to go back down to the second floor. Again, I tried the doors to the rooms, they're still locked, but I distinctly saw a light on inside in the shadow of a woman. Was someone messing with me? Confused, I made my way down to the first floor, and then right then, I was startled. On the stair landing below, standing in front of me, was a woman wearing a sweater. Her sweater was worn through with several holes. Her hair was streaked with grey. Her bangs hung low, obscuring her eyes. Her face was unusually gaunt, sunken cheeks, prominent knuckles, purple blotches mottling her skin. But the worst part, there were maggots crawling over her. I saw white worms wriggling across her shoulder and belly, dragging themselves, scuttling about. This woman looked seriously wrong. Frowning, I descended the stairs, trying to figure out what was going on with her. When I got close to where she stood, I tried to walk past her, but in that instant she suddenly spread her arms wide, blocking my path. She opened her mouth, revealing filthy, broken teeth, and made a sharp, clacking sound with her jaw, loud, menacing, like a warning. Faced with the strange sight, I froze in place, locked in a silent standoff. After a few seconds, a slick, unnatural sound came from somewhere on her body. Then crack, something fell to the floor. Dark, reddish minus black blood slowly pooled outward. My eyes locked on a hand. Her hands were spread out, her right wrist completely severed, the hand dangling and sliding down like rotting flesh onto the floor. It hit the ground with a dull thud. When I realized what I'd seen, I shouted and spun around, running back upstairs without a second thought. I escaped to the third floor and stopped on the landing. Looking down, the woman was shakily climbing the stairs after me. Her mouth was stretched into a grotesque, terminus-like grin that churned my stomach. Instantly, pure panic took hold. My forehead dripped with sweat. I cowed and stopped. I glanced wildly around. There was nowhere left to run. What could I do? What choice did I have? Tears blurred my vision. The hopelessness was suffocating. And then it hit me. I whispered to myself, "So that's why people choose to jump from here." A faint smile crossed my lips as I muttered, "So that's the truth behind it all." Without hesitation, I threw myself off the third minus floor, landing downward like a man possessed. A heavy, dull impact echoed through the night air of the apartment complex. Then, I lost consciousness. The next day, I woke up in a hospital bed, broken in places I couldn't count. Internal injuries too. Emergency surgery saved my life. Because of my accident, the entire project was shelved indefinitely. And during my hospital stay, that apartment building was not sold, it was demolished on the spot. That, in fact, is the story my friend Heathor and I encountered in some remote village. Because of our work, we often travel to various places. We're magazine reporters. That day, we were sent to investigate a supposedly haunted, abandoned village. It was infamous because of a past event where many villagers died. But usually, stories like this were just misunderstandings or disasters, natural calamities misremembered. Our job was to verify these rumors were false. This time, we thought it would be no different. We planned to wrap up quickly and head home. But things weren't that simple. We drove for hours out of Tokyo, crossing prefectural borders and deeper into the mountains. The village was hidden in a very remote spot, Many houses were left standing but weathered, peeling, clearly long unoccupied. Tall trees surrounded the village. Though it was just afternoon, sunlight barely filtered in. Everything was gloomy. Hifu and I started our interview. We took photos of the dilapidated houses, eerie swamps, the abandoned school. By the time we finished shooting, dusk was settling in. We decided driving mountainous roads at night was too risky. Besides, our interview was done early, so we agreed to spend the night there. We parked in front of the school, ate a simple dinner, and went to sleep. How long I slept, I don't know. I woke up and stretched my sore waist, glancing at my phone. It was only 1:50. I thought. Too early, why not sleep a little longer? Naturally, my eyes drifted to the window, toward the abandoned school nearby, and what I saw made me almost not believe my own eyes. Every single classroom light was on, and there were shadows moving inside, figures swaying back and forth. Who on earth would be at the school at this hour? And here, in this deserted village? It made no sense at all. I grabbed my camera and zoomed in. Sure enough, there were people, men, women, old and young, all there. Then Hifu woke up from the noise I made. I handed him the camera silently, then pointed toward the school. He looked, and just like me, was dumbstruck. We watched, unable to look away. After a while, Hifu suddenly said, "Should we get closer? This could be big news." If it were any other time, I'd jump at the chance without hesitation. But this once I felt a deep, sinking unease. I tried to warn him not to go. Still, Hifu ignored me. "This is a golden opportunity," he kept muttering as he reached for the card or handle. Panic boiled inside me. I tried desperately to stop him. Finally, he yanked the door open. The instant the car door squeaked, everyone inside the school turned their heads sharply to look right at us. I was so terrified I nearly forgot how to breathe. Hifu noticed I froze, so he followed my gaze. His face went pale. Then just a second later, all the school lights snapped off at once. We exchanged a look. Only one thought ran through both our minds: run. I started the car quickly. As we prepared to pull away, I glanced back toward the school again and shouted. They were running out, charging toward us. Every single one of them carried weapons: axes, sickles, tools sharp enough to kill. I slammed on the gas, speeding away. The whole time, I kept my eyes fixed on the road ahead as we tore through the village at over 80 kilometers an hour. Though they couldn't catch us, I dared not look left or right. At every home we passed, faces appeared at windows and doorways, eyes glaring fiercely. Finally, we burst through the narrow, winding mountain road and escaped the village. Afterward, I couldn't stop thinking, what kind of place was that village? A flood of urban legends came to mind, but no clear answers. Once on the highway, we stopped at the nearest rest area to catch our breath. Both of us were drenched in sweat, but at last, we could sleep without fear. The next day, back at the company, we told our boss and colleagues about the night's horror. But the camera had recorded nothing. No one believed us. Still, I knew what we'd lived through was real. When we checked the car, its rear was scratched and dented, no doubt from stones thrown by those villagers. After that, Hifu and I both left journalism. We each settled into regular office jobs. Life went on. Even now, when we meet and talk about that night, the memory still chills us. I work as a reporter covering entertainment and restaurant features. Sometimes, we reach out to businesses proactively. Other times, readers send tips. There's even mail postcards or old-fashioned fax messages from places to consider. I pick stories mostly based on gut feeling. If a place seems interesting, I go for it. If it feels dull, I don't bother. One day, After handing in an article, the newsroom was nearly empty. Some people were out, others on visits. I had no plans, so I casually flipped through postcards readers had sent. One letter contained a photo and a small note. The photo showed an old, traditional Japanese sweets shop, aged and quaint. The note's handwriting was fresh but messy, smeared in places. It just said, "Very delicious. Please do come and see." Seeing the words "please do come and see," I thought, surely this was an invitation from the shop itself. I had no idea why, but the message gave me a strange, eerie feeling, a tingle that sparked my curiosity. Well, I had some free time anyway. Why not take a look? Usually when I decide to interview a place, I'm very deliberate about it. But this felt different. Whenever I was about to visit an unfamiliar shop, I usually looked it up on a map or checked online first. But that day, I was feeling lazy. I just glanced at the address on the sticky note and roughly had a sense of where it was. I left with the attitude that it was okay if I couldn't find it. After driving for about an hour to the area, I parked near a supermarket and started walking. I wandered for over 10 minutes, thinking the place must be nearby. But all I saw were quiet residential streets, no sign of the Wagas High shop. Curious, I turned into a small alley. Near the end, I spotted a house that looked abandoned. The windows were tightly shut, and weeds overran the courtyard. The whole house felt damp, and there was this oppressive, eerie vibe about it. Just as I was about to turn away, I suddenly felt eyes on me from above. I looked up. There was only one small window open on the second floor. For a moment, the thought hit me, could someone be inside? A chill ran down my spine and goosebumps broke out all over me. I didn't wait around to confirm. I hurried away, after wandering a bit more nearby. Still no luck locating the shop in the photo. Before I realized it, I found myself at a small shopping street a little farther off. I wandered into a convenience store, grabbed a drink, then casually showed the shop owner the photo. I asked if he knew where that place was. He looked at the photo, puzzled, and thought for a while. Then suddenly he exclaimed, that should be that shop. Where did you get this photo?" I told him. "I'm an editor at a magazine. We're trying to interview that place." The photo was given by the shop owner. The man furrowed his brow and said, "That can't be. That shop burned down in a fire over 10 years ago. I think everyone inside died. The place was rebuilt later, but the new residents moved out after a while. Now it's just an empty house." Then, shaking his head, he added, "Honestly, sending a prank letter like this, it's pretty dark." Hearing this, I couldn't help but wonder, was that empty house he mentioned the same creepy one I saw? The house that gave off that sinister vibe, and the feeling I had of being watched. I didn't dare investigate further. After thanking the owner, I went straight back to the office. Back at the editorial department, I recounted everything to my supervisor. I wanted to show him the letter, but after rifling through my bag, it was nowhere to be found. I thought maybe I dropped it in the car. Just as I was about to go check, my supervisor stopped me and said, "You probably won't find it now." He sighed and continued, "About 5 or 6 years ago, when I was still new, something exactly like this happened. But the interviewer washed me. It was my predecessor." I asked, "Really? Who was he?" My supervisor looked resigned. "He's not around anymore. The day he left for that interview, he never came back. It became a huge case. All he said was, 'I'm going to interview that Wagas High shop,' and then he drove off. He just disappeared." I remember he mentioned a letter. Something almost exactly like what you described. They plea to come see the place. But we never found that letter either. He shook his head. "Maybe your case is a prank too. But hearing your story just brings the old one rushing back. Something about this feels off." Listening to him, A cold crept over me, nauseating and terrifying. I searched my car inside and out, but the letter was gone. Since then, I've often wondered who sent that letter. What happened to my supervisor's predecessor? And why am I the one being summoned this time? Years have passed, 3, to be exact, but every time I receive a letter like that, my heart still pounds. I can't help but worry if it will happen again. Back when I was still a journalist, I had an older colleague named Ken Pei. Ken Pei had trouble walking. He dragged his left foot as he moved. I think he even had some kind of support device for it. But he was full of energy. If he caught wind of a lead, he'd race off to investigate right away. His persistence made a deep impression on me. Once, Ken Pei and I traveled together for an interview. The weather forecast had called for snow, so we took the Shinkansen and local trains to their destination. When we arrived near the station, it was already snowing heavily. The snow had piled up thickly on the ground. Originally, we had planned to rent a car after getting off the train to get around, but due to Mr. Jianping's scheduling mistake, we couldn't secure one. I actually knew he didn't like taking taxis, but since I was the one paying, I suggested we call a cab anyway. Yet, he stubbornly refused. At first, I thought he was just being polite, but no matter what, he wouldn't agree to take a taxi. His stubbornness made me really angry. I felt he was being immature. I was in my 20s then, and more hot-tempered than I am now, so I couldn't help but bring up his books and poems during our argument. That started the quarrel between us. In the end, we didn't go for the interview that day. When we got back to the hotel, we didn't say a word and just retreated separately to our rooms. Once inside my room, after calming down a bit, I began to regret how I had treated Mr. Jianping. I actually wanted to go to his room to apologize. Just as I was about to, my phone rang. It was him. On the call, he said, "I was too immature earlier. I'm really sorry." Right from the start, he was apologizing. I told him it was me who should be apologizing, but he insisted he'd lost his temper and said some nasty things out of turn. Actually, he hadn't gone that far. It was just a misunderstanding on his part. We kept apologizing to each other over the phone until we decided to bury the hatchet and go for drinks together. I arrived first in the hotel lobby and waited. When Mr. Jianping came up, his face was a bit awkward. I felt awkward too. We apologized to each other again before heading to a nearby izakaya. Over drinks, we went over the schedule for the next day's interviews. Once finished, he suddenly said, "I'm sorry to bring up that unpleasantness again about the taxi." He said he hoped he'd listened to his reason for refusing to take a taxi. He began. It was about 10 years ago, when I was around 30-5. At the time, I was working as a reporter for a weekly magazine, investigating a missing person case. He went on to summarize the story. A nurse had suddenly vanished. She had told her mother she planned to visit home during the summer break. On the day she was supposed to travel, before leaving, she called her mother again to say she'd arrive at the nearest train station around 1 p.m. But after that call, she disappeared. The footage from the station showed her last at the ticket gate. After exiting the station, she got into a taxi, but rather than going home, the cab headed for a camping site in the opposite direction. From that point, her whereabouts became a complete mystery. The strange thing was, although the nurse had told her mother she'd be picked up at the station, she got into the taxi on her own. The cab driver said the nurse told him she planned to meet someone at the camping site around 2 p.m. She got out at the campsite. Though it was a weekday, there were 3 other groups there. Despite that, and including the site manager, no one saw any sign of the nurse. It's worth adding that when the nurse contacted her mother earlier, mentioning the trip home, and even on the day she disappeared, she didn't mention anything about meeting anyone. It was as if no one was expecting her to meet up with someone. On the other hand, the nurse failed to contact her mother at the expected arrival time. Around 1:30 p.m. Her mother called her phone, someone answered, but there was silence. By around 2 p.m. the phone was switched off. By 5 p.m. there was still no news. Worried, the nurse's parents filed a missing person report. The police suspected foul play, so the next day they launched a search involving over 200 officers. They combed the campsite and nearby areas thoroughly, but found no clues. To this day, the nurse remains missing, her fate unknown. Mr. Giant continued. The police suspected that the disappearance might be connected to a nearby emerging religious cult. There was a group facility belonging to that religion near the camping site, and their followers often showed up around the campground. After the nurse appeared there, she reportedly had several disputes with other campers. That's why the cult came under suspicion, but there was no concrete evidence linking them directly to her disappearance. Some speculated she might have been kidnapped by them for some unknown reason. Another suspect was the taxi driver who last had contact with the nurse. Before working as a taxi driver, Aichida committed a sexual assault crime and only became a driver after serving his sentence. Because of his criminal record, rumors spread that he had lured the nurse into his taxi with deceitful words, then drove her to the remote camping area where he assaulted her. The police did keep an eye on him and investigated multiple times, but he always had an alibi. After dropping the nurse off at the camping ground, he soon picked up other passengers. If he had killed her, he didn't have enough time to dispose of any evidence. That's where the case hit a dead end. In short, no solid leads emerged, and that nurse vanished without a trace. As I listened to his account, I couldn't help but wonder what any of this had to do with his hatred for taxis. He seemed to notice the question in my eyes and went on. As the journalist assigned to cover that case, I visited the area around the camping site several times. I even tried to interview that taxi driver, but he refused every time. Once, I happened to hail his taxi while heading to the camping ground. I concealed my journalist identity and tried subtly to get him to talk, but he only gave vague, meaningless answers. So wanting to get to the core of the matter, I decided to be upfront. While waiting at a red light, I revealed that I was a reporter and directly asked him about the nurse's disappearance. What happened next is an image you'll never forget. After my question, he suddenly turned his head to stare at me. Then, in the next second, what parted yourself? He turned back to face forward and burst out shouting 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, at 0. The taxi suddenly sped forward. I remember it clearly. It was still a red light, but he accelerated recklessly. The force slammed me back into the seat. Then, out of nowhere, a truck collided into us from the side. When I came to, I was lying in a hospital bed. I had been unconscious for a week but had survived. Still, my left leg was left permanently paralyzed. As for the taxi driver, he died on the spot. Hearing this, I was stunned. I forced myself to keep calm and said, "So that's why you never wanted to take a taxi again?" Mr. Jianping's face grew heavy. That accident was one reason. Yes, but... He paused, took a deep breath, then continued with a grave tone. After that driver died, the case turned into a cold case. I still haven't given up searching for the truth. After all, I'm a journalist. Once discharged, I returned to the area and resumed my investigation. During that time, there was one occasion where I had no choice but to take a taxi. The car happened to be from the same company as the deceased drivers, so I took the chance to discreetly ask this new driver about the disappearance and the dead driver. Unexpectedly, he was very talkative and told me a lot. But then, suddenly, he said something really strange. He asked me. "You're a journalist, right? If you keep digging, next time you might really die." I asked him what he meant. He didn't answer but repeated coldly, "If you continue, you might really die." At that moment, we stopped at a red light. Nervous, I glanced at the driver through the rearview mirror and caught him staring straight back. Our eyes locked, and then, in the next second, his lips curled into a faint smile before he suddenly started shouting, "5, 4, 3, 2, 2, 1. Fear froze me completely. Those few seconds drenched me in a cold sweat I could not shake. When he finished counting, he turned to me again and burst into a wild, maniacal laugh. His eyes were terrifying, beyond description, not like a normal person's eyes at all. Madness was the only way to describe them. I was so scared I threw the money down and bolted out of the car. He kept laughing, a sound that gave me goosebumps. As I fled, he called after me one last chilling warning, "Be careful the next time you take a taxi." He finished speaking with a laugh, started the car, and drove off into the distance, disappearing at the end of the road. Ever since that encounter, I'd become paranoid, constantly on edge. Later, I found out the driver who died was a member of that religious group, and so was the owner of the taxi company. But that was all I could uncover. When I tried to dig deeper, my colleagues warned me off. "Don't get involved any further," they said. "If you keep pushing, you might really end up dead." So that case was closed right there. From then on, I never took a taxi again. No, it's more accurate to say I refused to take taxis ever again. After listening to Mr. Kenby's story, I felt a heavy weight settle inside me. I said quietly, "So that's what you went through. That's why it's so important to be careful getting into taxis. Handing your life over to a stranger, it's a dangerous gamble." I learned that lesson the hard way with my own body. Hearing Mr. Kenby's experience made me resolve from that day on. I too stopped taking taxis. I still remember the year it all happened. Back then, I was a reporter specializing in exposing corporate scandals. There was one company everyone across the country knew, an unshakable giant. Even when the economy soured, they kept throwing money into building new headquarters. Within journalistic circles, we called them the Unbreakable. Rumors circulated about fierce infighting inside the company. Some people had been run off so ruthlessly. It was brutal. I spent 8 months keeping a close watch. During that time, one of my inside sources was an employee named Mr. Soto. He wasn't much of a talker, but sharp and dependable. Before we became close, I often invited him out for drinks, trying to build rapport. After a while, he started opening up about things he'd seen and heard. The person who came up most often was a department head, Mr. Fukumura. In any top tier company, you know, some people don't have the best character. Many only keep their eyes on their own advantage. But Fukumura was different. He always wore a gentle smile and treated everyone with respect. He was one of the few good men in the company. Polite, kind to everyone, the very definition of a gentleman. When Soto was still a new hire, Fukumura hadn't been promoted to department head yet, but he looked after Soto like a mentor. Even after Fukumura was promoted and transferred to another department, they stayed on good terms. The gossip I gathered was that Fukumura's faction was gaining the upper hand in the internal power struggles. Once the new building was completed, the department would move there. But on the day of the new building's grand opening, right after the ceremony, I got a message from the company's security guard. Something bad had happened there. When I arrived on scene, a few police officers were coming and going. The company was notorious for suppressing news and sealing off information, so none of the other reporters even knew what was going on. Though I was the first journalist to arrive, I still couldn't find out any details. So I decided to wait for Soto to finish work, then met him at a nearby izakaya to get the full story. Sato told me that on the day of the new building's completion, right after the ceremony ended, he went outside to smoke on the first floor and ran into Fukumura. At that point, everyone thought Fukumura was about to be promoted again. Instead, he told Sato, "Little brother Sato, thanks for everything. Actually, in being transferred, this might be the last time we meet this year." Sato asked where Fukumura was being sent. The answer was a city in Thailand, Dai. When Sato looked it up, he realized it wasn't really a transfer, it was exile. Fukumura hadn't done anything seriously wrong. Rather, his direct superior's faction had lost badly in the power struggle. So Fukumura got scapegoated, blamed for many scandals, and kicked out to a remote post nobody wanted. Sato told me Fukumura was staring fixedly at the new building's courtyard, the most beautiful part of the complex. Fukumura had been the one most eager to see it finished. Fukumura forced a small smile and said to him, "I was looking forward to coming here to drink tea and enjoy the cherry blossoms during breaks. Such a shame." Then he said goodbye and left. 10 minutes later, Sato heard news that Fukumura had fallen from the rooftop, landing in the middle of the courtyard. After hearing Sato's account, I documented everything and kept following the company's story. I later learned from others inside the company that they quickly spun the incident as a tragic but fortunate accident. Fukumura died inside the building's courtyard. Since he had no family, his parents were already dead, the company easily buried the news. At the funeral that followed, not a single executive involved in the factional infighting showed up. The new building continued operating as usual, and the company's business went on without interruption. By this point, my investigation felt like a classic case of corporate power struggle ending in death. I thought to myself, if I wrote this up, given the company's fame, it would definitely blow up. Then just 2 days later, Sato suddenly contacted me with shocking news. He had received a letter from manager Fukumura. The letter was dated the day before Fukumura's suicide. It was filled with words of gratitude, but the last 3 lines left me utterly baffled. In the letter, Fukumura wrote that HED decided to spend more time in the new building's central courtyard, but living there alone was too lonely. So he planned to bring a few friends along and ask them to take good care of him. I remember thinking, what an eerie message. At the time, those lines made no sense to me. But what happened next surpassed anything I could have imagined. In the following 2 months, 3 more people died. Each one jumped from the top floor down into the courtyard. After the incidents, the rooftop was closed off and no longer accessible. The company sealed off all news of those 3 deaths. No other media caught wind of any of it. That's when I started realizing this had gone beyond an internal company feud. Something far darker was unfolding. I asked Sato to keep a close eye on the company. One night, while working late at that building, Sato told me what HED seen walking down the corridor beside the courtyard on the first floor. He glanced through the glass and caught sight of 4 black shadows gathered in the exact center. Then one of the shadows stood up suddenly and bowed deeply to him. He said it was unmistakably manager Fukumura's gesture. When he told me that, a cold chill ran down my spine. If that shadow really was Fukumura, who were the other 3? Had they also been transferred to the courtyard? Sato said he didn't know. Fear made him run away immediately, and he had no idea who those other 3 colleagues were. That very same night, I was abruptly woken by the phone. It was a security guard from the company, his voice trembling as he whispered, "Someone's just hanged themselves in the courtyard." I hurriedly asked when it happened. "Just now. A co-worker found them." By then, with 5 deaths in the courtyard, the company took drastic measures, completely sealing off both the courtyard and rooftop. They even boarded up the glass so no one could see inside. After that, no more accidents from that company ever made the news. Still, these incidents, combined with Sato's strange encounters, sparked something in me, fierce spark of journalistic instinct. Over the next several months, I kept digging, quietly bribing insiders. Bit by bit, I pieced together a horrifying truth. All those who later died in the courtyard, they were people who had conspired against and framed manager Fukumura in the factional battles. They'd been exiled to the courtyard. Among them were mid-level managers, co-workers from Fukuura's own department, rumor mongers, and even one senior executive scapegoated for corruption. Each had played the